Presenting Benny Goodman and his orchestra.
Good morning, everybody. Hey, Chris. Morning, Mona. Hey, Martin. Hey, Wendy and William. Good morning all around. Hey, Dawn and Susan and Ann. Hey, Karen, Bruce, Carol.
Let's dance to a half-hour rhythm by Benny Goodman and his orchestra, the Raja Rhythm, playing for
Hey, Octavio, Kathleen. Ah, thanks, Mona.
Dodging a Divorcee, the first number. Benny Goodman and his orchestra.
No bowling for me today. This is all knit, you know. Morning, Jean. Hey, Vicky. Hey, Susan. Hey, Brian. Hey, Lee, over on YouTube. Hey, Becky and Alexandra. Hey, Roy. Hey, Gladys. Toma, that's correct. Hey, Bridget. Hey, Fort Wayne. Hey, Toma, can't make any promises on including your family here. Hey, Mary. Hey, Kathleen. Hey, Betsy. I do get the occasional email. You know, my great-great-great-grandfather owned a shoe factory. He should definitely be on your tour. Octavio, I loved it. I mean, I wanted to talk about it without spoiling stuff, but, you know, on the one hand, I'm going, oh, they ran out of Western cliches, so now they got to do blank with a blank, and then the other part of me, I'm going, they're doing blank with a blank. This is the best thing ever. It's like they got all my action figures together. Hey, Avi. Hey, Bridget. Hey, Becky. Joanne, yeah, I found my stash of Benny Goodman recordings from the Congress Hotel. A lot of them disappeared off of archive over the years, but like 10 years ago, I got half a dozen shows from this run. And I found them. I've been going through hard drives and reorganizing files all this week. See, my mother is house sitting. Hey, Mom. Morning, Larry. Hey, Cheryl. Hey, Jacqueline, Joanne. Hey, Karen. Oh, yeah, this is Super Bowl. I kind of forget.
The divorcee successfully, and we might say rhythmically eluded, Benny Goodman presents Helen Ward singing The Day I Let You Get Away.
Are we getting more snow this week? Alright, this is another block of Benny Goodman, live at the Congress Hotel. This is from, I think, the week before the one that we normally broadcast. This is from January 3rd, 1936. Alright, well, more snow I'm fine with. We haven't had nearly enough for me to get tired of it yet. I see as part of the Super Bowl festivities, Miley Cyrus and Green Day played last night. That would have been a good show to see. I haven't seen Green Day since they were playing in clubs in the mid-90s. I guess the place I saw them was technically theater-sized, but it wasn't nice enough to call it theater. It was just like a big metal shack. Good morning, Steve. Morning, everybody. Now I'm looking up the weather over here. I shouldn't get distracted like that. Next week, on Thursday night, we've got Mansions and Mysteries of River North. That'll be followed by 2 new tours. Thanks, Steve. We'll be doing a tour version of the Bohemian Talk a week from Thursday. Yeah, it's like new release day, only unlike Apple Music, I know what to suggest. It's like really Apple Music. I spend all week listening to Kelsey Carter's EP, and then she puts out a new song and you don't include it in my new releases list? How long does it take for you to figure out the AI here? Hey, Laurie in Dubuque.
By Benny Goodman and his orchestra, and the next tune, Sandman.
Hey, Jordan. Oh, geez. You know what? I've should have had it up like this the whole time. It's also saying 8 p.m. Okay, there we go. All right, I'll be thinking with my whole head soon. Timothy, you need more tea? I got more tea here. Lots and lots more tea. Enjoy, Kelly. Morning, Peter. Realize it's been a longer time than I thought since I did this tour. I guess it was like last May when I was broadcasting from Iowa. Lori, I am drinking some Throat Coat Slippery Elm Licorice Tea. Boker Tov, Lisa. Thanks, Tara. Morning, Kim. Hey, Mike. Morning, Todd, over on Twitch. Sinus Sunday's a good word. It's sinus every day. Hey, Mary.
Benny Goodman is playing for you from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago, and his next tune, Lights Out.
I will let Benny do one more tune. Lights Out. This is a new one. I haven't had this on the other Bennies. Digging through my hard drive, I found all the recordings I saved a long time ago. From the deleted years, as they call them, from about 2003 to 2012. Been consolidating hard drives, reorganizing my Evernote files, finding all the stories that I've covered but forgotten about over the last 2 years. There's been a lot. When I come up with a new story for a virtual tour every day, there's a lot of them that I'll cover for a couple of days and then they're just out of my mind. So I gotta reacquaint myself with some of them, get the files organized. Morning, Patty Peel. Morning, Dana. We'll let Benny Goodman finish up this tune before we get started. Yeah, Doreen, a week from today it's going to be a Lost Stories tour. It's not really best of, it's stuff that we've talked about on virtual tours maybe, but never actually worked into a regular one. Now, a lot of stories that, if they've been written up at all, it's been very minor. Hey, where'd that music go? Benny?
Presenting
Oh,
Benny.
no. I must have pushed the wrong button there. Okay, we'll do it like that. I think this is probably still Helen Ward singing. Helen Deal is a murder story that I worked that one into the Lakeview tour. Morning, Judy. All right, everybody, we're letting Benny Goodman and Helen Ward finish up this tune. At least we think it's Helen Ward. It's a pretty good song. I gotta learn this. But I've mostly been playing the same one Benny Goodman tune show for all this time. I found 7 more. All from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago. You know, I had a lot of coffee this morning already. I don't know if it's enough for me.
And again, Benny Goodman presents his Lady of Song, Helen Ward.
Yep, Helen Ward, his Lady of Song. All right, everybody, that means it is time for us to go ahead and get started here. We just push all of the necessary buttons and say, all right, welcome along, everybody. I'm Adam Seltzer for Mysterious Chicago Tours. I've been a tour guide and historian here in Chicago for going on 20 years now. Got about a dozen Chicago history books out, including Mysterious Chicago, the book, H.H. Holmes, The True History of the White City Devil, Ghosts of Chicago, and coming this summer, Graceland Cemetery, Chicago's Stories, Symbols, and Secrets. I'm also on the History Channel and the Travel Channel all the time, so I am, of course, incredibly famous. And you should definitely pay attention to whatever I say. We got a couple of milestones that we got to cover here. One of them I'd totally forgotten about, but it came up on my search history. My very first book, a young adult novel called How to Get Suspended and Influence People, came out 15 years ago today. It feels like much longer than that. That book seems absolutely ancient to me now. There was some controversy. You see that artwork up in the top corner there? That freaked out some woman in Boise. She tried to have it kicked out of the library. Best publicity I ever got. It's common nowadays to say, no, it's not a badge of honor to get your book banned. It's one thing when you're saying that on national television, quite another when that news item in Boise is the best publicity you ever get. But speaking of, we got another milestone that I really got to cover here. I noticed over the course of the week, I happened to log on to the Facebook page and noticed that we have passed 30,000 followers. Yay! All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for sticking with me and to continue finding me over the course of these past nearly 2 years now that we've been doing these virtual tours every single day, plus full-length ones twice a week. It's been a lot of incredible research, and now we're getting some of it all consolidated and organized so I can work it into more tours starting next week. All right, everybody, but today we're going to cover Oakwood Cemetery. Let's go ahead on in. Oh, wrong button there. And when you first go in, and one of the first things you come up to is this relic of the Great Chicago Fire. It's one thing Oakwoods does that a lot of local Chicago cemeteries don't, is having commemoration of various events, things that affected Chicago over the course of it. Now, Oakwoods, depending on who you ask or how you count things, is kind of the oldest cemetery in Chicago. Now, Graceland started their paperwork before Rose Hill, but Rose Hill started burials first. Oakwoods actually started their paperwork and was formed as an organization back in the mid-1850s, before Graceland and before Rose Hill had begun. But burials didn't start there until well after both of them. They didn't start until the second half of the 1860s, after really just being paperwork for a long time. But now it's one of the largest cemeteries in the city. It's endlessly fascinating. There's a lot of cool stuff there, including this relic of the fire. It's probably the remains of a store or something. It's very similar to over in Lincoln Park, and they've now moved this. I should really update the footage. But used to be just buried in this ring of bushes was this old, the remains of a hardware store. We'll move up a little bit from there just to get an overview of Oakwood Cemetery down on 65th Street in Chicago. Here's Sunset Boulevard. This place is ready for its close-up. We'll just move in a little bit here. Just to note, there are signs up. First of all, saying no loud music, no dogs allowed, no alcohol, no illegal substances, no barbecuing. But, though it says no barbecuing, they do in fact have a barbecue pit set up. So if you want to break the rules, they're all set up for you to do so. And a very nice little spot overviewing the pond. It kind of harkens back to the days when cemeteries were thought of as much more leisure spaces than they are now. These days, there are people who absolutely don't think I should even be doing tours, certainly not making jokes. Cemeteries are just a place to rend your garments. But back in the day, for a while, Graceland had to have tickets to come in on the weekend just because it was so crowded with people coming in to have picnics and enjoy themselves. But we'll cover a couple while we're around the pond here. There's one of the guy who's made many of the tombstones himself, Elmo Williams. Tombstone Williams, he was called. So engraved being right here. He died in 1995. Before that, he owned and operated Elmo's Tombstone Service nearby. They had the famous phrase, "Before you go, call Elmo." And they were still working by hand last time anybody checked. More and more tombstones are made with lasers these days. They said that these ones last a lot longer, and they were still easy enough to make. Elmo said that he could make a tombstone in, I think, under an hour, he said. Carve a tombstone in 60 minutes. One of the biggest tombstone dealers in Chicago at the time. We'll proceed down along a little ways to perhaps the largest monument in the cemetery. A little bit further down, perhaps the tallest of the obelisks, is to Big Bill Thompson. Big Bill Thompson was perhaps the most corrupt and obnoxious mayor we ever had in Chicago, which of course we all know is saying something. But we're the kind of city that votes for people called Big Bill as our mayor. Now, Big Bill started out all right, but he kind of went off the deep end. When he was running for re-election in the 1920s, not only was he well beloved by the gangsters, but also he got in this real tear about anti-British stuff. He was trying to burn pro-British library books. This was all kind of an effort to kiss up to Irish immigrants that he hoped would vote for him. We'll also point out his father is buried in the plot here too. It's actually, we're at his father's plot right over here, his exact space. His father had one of the best sets of facial hair ever recorded in Chicago history. Colonel William Hale Thompson Sr. But when Big Bill was finally voted out, it's worth reading the entire article that was placed in the Chicago Tribune. Now, Big Bill was a Republican. The Chicago Tribune was a Republican paper. But here's what they said. William Hale Thompson was defeated Tuesday after a campaign in which he alone made disgraceful. The election was an ejection, a dirty job, but Chicago has washed itself and put on clean clothes. Thompson recognized the Tribune as his chief enemy. The Tribune was glad to earn that opinion. It certainly tried to do so. It has taken the fight to him on every occasion during the long and depraved course of his administration. It is unpleasant business to eject a skunk, but someone has to do it. For Chicago, Thompson has meant filth, corruption, obscenity, idiocy, bankruptcy. He has given the city an international reputation for moronic buffoonery, barbaric crime, triumphant hoodlumism, unchecked graft, and a dejected citizenship. He nearly ruined the property and completely destroyed the pride of the city. He made Chicago a byword for the collapse of American civilization. In his attempt to continue this, he excelled himself as a liar and defamer and character. He's out. He is not only out, but he is dishonored. He is deserted by his friends. He is permanently marked by the evidence of his character and conduct. His health is impaired by his ways of life, and he leaves office and goes from the city the most discredited man who ever held place in it. I always feel like I need a cigarette after that. I don't even smoke, but man. Yeah, the Tribune did not really care for him very much. Nobody really did. This was a guy who would announce that he was having a debate with his opponents, but he wouldn't tell the opponents. He would just show up with caged rats labeled with the names of his opponents. This kind of, but they called it moronic buffoonery. They were not far off. It was just a whole bunch of bigotry, prejudice. When he was running against Cermak, he picked on Cermak for having a Polish last name. All kinds of stuff like that, but I just love that article. Other newspapers published very similar things at the same time. I had to switch it up and add a few of those in soon. We'll move down to another mayor just up the road from him. Just up the road from Big Bill is Harold Washington. He had a great line. We were still kind of recovering from Big Bill Thompson in the 1980s when Harold Washington became mayor of Chicago. During his campaign, he said it used to be anywhere you went in Chicago, they would say, Al Capone. Now they say, how's Harold? Unfortunately, he died while he was in office. Also been, you can see, United States Congressional District, Illinois State Senator. The epitaph there, remember me as one who tried to be fair. That's a good one. Not too self-aggrandizing or anything, which can sometimes be a turnoff. But hey, if you move just down the road from him, you can see Thompson in the background here. And here's Sammy, the upstairs cat, is in the hallway right now, if you hear any meowing. This is Calvin DeWolf, who was a part of the tight-knit scene of abolitionists operating in Chicago. He was a cousin of William Frederick DeWolf, who we talk about quite a bit. He was buried over at Graceland Cemetery. Perhaps his most notable affair as an abolitionist was in 1860. A woman named Eliza Grayson escaped from her enslaver Stephen Knuckles in Nebraska, made her way to Chicago, got work doing domestic work in a brothel. But she talked a little too much in the brothel. A couple of women who weren't very sympathetic overheard that she was a refugee enslaved person and contacted Stephen Knuckles and said, okay, we got her. Come get her and we'll give you a reward. So he arrived in town. Word got out among the abolitionists in the city. Calvin DeWolf did a scheme where he had both Eliza Grayson and Stephen Knuckles arrested, but really it was just kind of a ruse to keep Stephen Knuckles out of the way and to keep the crowd at bay until he could get Eliza on a train out of the city. She was able to escape successfully. Nobody's really too sure what happened to her after that. Stephen Knuckles still has a park named after him in Nebraska. But perhaps better known at the Underground Railroad circuit was Charles Volney Dyer, who is right up over here on the other side of the pond. I believe this was actually his land. They originally purchased it from him in the 1850s with the purpose of making it a cemetery. He was also a president at Rose Hill, but is buried down over here. And he was sometimes referred to as the president of the Underground Railroad. Now, this was not an organized enough organization that they really had things like presidents, but he was a hardcore supporter of it and worked very hard for it here in Chicago. He's one of a few guys that I kind of call a Forrest Gump in Chicago history. He just turns up everywhere in Chicago history. Came to the city as a doctor, dissected the first man who was hanged here, a guy named John Stone, in company with the other doctor in town at the time, Levy Boone, who was later a mayor as a member of the No Do-Nothing Party. Completely opposite politics from Charles Volney Dyer. Now, my favorite story about him is one day he was in his office. There was a person he was trying to help escape who had been hiding out in his house, and one of his clerks came running in saying, "They're down from down south. The slave catchers are here. They got that guy you're trying to help. They took him over to the Mansion House Hotel." So Dyer got up from breakfast, grabbed his cane, located what room they were in, and busted in where they had the guy all tied up. And the slave catcher said, "Sir, you're interfering with our domestic institutions." To which Dyer took his cane and said, "Well, you are interfering with my breakfast," and busted his cane over the guy's head. Was able to make a clean escape. Later on, people presented him with a brand new cane to replace the old one. Now, whether that really happened exactly as described, it's just too much like an action movie. You kind of feel like they had to have been embellishing it a little bit. But it was widely reported at the time that it happened. There are primary sources on this, and the new cane that was given to him is still in the collection of the Chicago History Museum today. Mansion House Hotel. Which is it, a mansion, a house, or a hotel? It's kind of like we're playing MASH here. Could it also be a shack? Move just a little ways down from Roland Burris. I did not really do my homework of fixing up these recordings this morning. I thought I had. Shows what I know. Move down over to here to Roland Burris and his wife's new mausoleum right up here in this triangle. Which I always say, Mayor Harold Washington just put, "Remember me as one who tried to be fair." Burris goes a little more all out, listing all of his major accomplishments. Trailblazer, first African-American to become Illinois Attorney General, Illinois State Comptroller. It doesn't include that he was the guy that Blagojevich appointed to the Senate to replace Barack Obama after he was elected president. The interesting thing here, though, is Burris is still with us. Burris is still alive and well as of this writing. But, I think this is fantastic. If you want to have some control over how you're remembered, go for it. Do it for yourself. That's the best way to do it. Have some control. Very often, people will build these things without any kind of epitaph, or it'll just be something like loyal and true, and then who's going to remember that? But right across, he kind of gets overshadowed, though, as right across from him, up against the pond, across the pond from Big Bill. It's a good one for this week. Jesse Owens, Olympic champion of 1936. Now, 1936 was the Berlin Olympics. Hitler was very set on using these Olympics to show off the superiority of the Aryan race. And then here comes Jesse Owens, winning several gold medals. 4 gold medals in 1936. Most successful person there. Just watch a quick video of him here. He's the one who's way out in front of everybody else.
As he wins the final and equals the world's record time. This and his later victory in the long jump may well be the athletic performances of the century. Now, notably, Hitler did not shake his hand as he did with most of the gold medal winners. But Owens said when he came back, "When I came back to my native country after all these stories about Hitler, I still couldn't ride in the front of the bus. I had to go in the back door. I couldn't live where I wanted, and I wasn't invited to shake hands with Hitler, but I also wasn't invited to the White House." Eventually, President Ford gave him a Presidential Medal of Freedom. George H.W. Bush gave him a Medal of Honor a decade after his death. For an athlete who was that healthy, he was also a pack-a-day smoker and died here in Chicago in 1980 at the age of 66. Now, I know when people come on Chicago stuff, we also want to talk about the gangsters. So here we go. There's this great row of mausoleums down here. And amongst those mausoleums was not the first gangster casualty in the city, but the one that really kicked things off in May of 1920, Big Jim Colosimo. Now, Big Jim was initially married to Mrs. Colosimo here. This was his first wife. But then in the late 1910s, he divorced her and married Dale Winter, a young woman who sang at his club.
Around 1920, as Prohibition was getting started, he was apparently telling everybody, boys, I'm going to clean up my act a bit. Now, I've been running the vice operations here in Chicago for the last 15 years or so, and everything's run smoothly. I don't think we really need to get into bootleg liquor, and anyway, my wife doesn't want me to. So we'll still have the brothels, we'll still have the gambling, but no bootleg liquor. Let's stay away from that stuff. This, of course, made him a massive target, and he was shot to death right inside of his cafe in May of 1920. Now, when Detective Sergeant John W. Norton, a guy who comes up in so many stories around here, came to question Mrs. Colosimo, he said, "Do you suspect anyone?" And she said, "I should say I suspect everyone." There was a rumor that Torrio's young lieutenant Al Capone had been the one who did the killing. It's almost certainly not true, but it helped bolster Capone's reputation. Other people say they brought in Frankie Yale from New York to do it, which is possible. It would make all the sense in the world that they would want someone who wasn't from Chicago and would be getting right out of town to do it, but I feel like Frankie Yale would have been above that kind of dirty work by then. And one other thing, you can see it kind of looks with the door bent out of shape. It's like he tried to bust out of the place. Really, it was probably somebody trying to bust in. Big Jim's funeral was one of the first really big mob funerals that would become a trademark of the 1920s. Thousands of people lining the streets, truckloads of flowers, and it was mentioned in the press that he was buried in a solid bronze casket. Now, I guess maybe somebody thought that solid bronze casket would fetch a pretty penny down at the scrapyard. So somebody did try to bust in. Because of that, we can do some tomb snooping. You know, we love some tomb snooping around here. He's the only one in there. Well, the weird thing is it says he died in 1919, which is definitely not the case. Big Jim died in 1920. That's not in dispute. There's all the newspaper articles from that week. There's his death certificate. Should have gone to Elmo Tombstone Williams. But really, tombstones and slabs like this, I think probably especially inside of mausoleums, typos are incredibly common. Partly because I just gotta figure, you know, the guy doing the carving there, you know, his tongue stuck out just ever so slightly. Was probably still writing 1919 on his checks. And you know how it is. But figured, oh, you know, nobody's ever gonna know about it. And here we are, 102 years later, still talking about it. Now, among the other gangsters, just across from him, across from the mausoleums a little ways. Now, this is a non-sectarian cemetery. People of all faiths can be and are buried here. When we talk about the gangs, we tend to talk about the Irish gangs on the north side and the Italian gangs on the south side. That's really oversimplifying things. There were there were Italians in the north side, there were Irishmen in the south side, and there was Jake Greasy Thumb Guzik, who worked for Capone. Greasy Thumb Guzik, they called him Greasy Thumb because he was the guy who would make all the deals. He was a fixer and a bookkeeper. Now, early on, he overheard a plot to murder Capone and ratted the person out. That got him into Capone's trust. He became the treasurer and financial guru for the outfit in the 1950s. Now, he died of a heart attack at the age of 69, which is really old for a gangster. Very few of these guys really made it much into their 30s. Very few of them got at least as close to their whole 70 as Jake Greasy Thumb Guzik did. At the time, it was said that the synagogue had never had more Italian people in it than there was at his funeral. And of course, there is also an entire Jewish section down on the south end of the cemetery. My buttons are all of a mess, and this was filmed some time ago. But there's a big sign there saying private property not owned by Dignity Memorial. This is controlled by a few synagogues that have long since moved away. And when asked a couple of years ago, one of the rabbis said, we feel the responsibility, but we don't have any members with family here anymore. And also we just got firebombed a while ago, so we have kind of more pressing concerns. But this was a Jewish section that was run by 3 synagogues that have now long since moved away. We'll move back here a little bit just to see the other side going in. Selig Morris was in the iron and metal business. And many of you have been here before, because last October during Mystericon, Heather organized the cleanup here, where we took it and started out looking like this. And by the time we ran out of car space to haul stuff away in, we had it looking at least like this. This is one of my favorite things that we did at Mystericon. Here's the whole group. Everybody tag yourself. And right across from this section are the Holtons, who are often said to have been victims of H.H. Holmes, the Devil in the White City guy, whose picture should have been coming up right there. Now, it is often said that when H.H. Holmes moved to Chicago, old Mrs. Holton was trying to run the pharmacy herself while her husband, the doctor, was slowly dying of cancer upstairs, so she was only too happy to sell the pharmacy, or to hire this energetic young go-getter H.H. Holmes. But then it is usually said that the Holtons disappeared and were never seen again. Holmes told everybody that they had moved to California and that he now owned the pharmacy. It's generally implied that he must have killed them, but also they were making a mistake when they first started telling this story in the 1940s. The Holtons were real people, but the doctor was a young woman, not an old man. Her name was Elizabeth S. Holton. Her husband had some kind of job on the railway. So here, it was a kind of a big moment in H.H. Holmes lore when I found this one. It's me taking a selfie at the graves. So we can see that she did in fact sell the pharmacy to H.H. Holmes. By all accounts, she had some real trouble getting the money, because that's H.H. Holmes. He was a swindler before he was a serial killer. But she did eventually get the money, retired, apparently settled down into life as a housewife after that. And you can see that she and her husband both lived well into the 20th century. So H.H. Holmes is off the hook for those ones anyway. Well, we're talking Chicago crime. It's one that we just found on Find a Grave, right past this genius here. Is George M. Shippy, who about 10 years after H.H. Holmes was the chief inspector for the Chicago police and eventually the chief of police himself. Now, Shippy, there's not really a nice way to put this. The guy was kind of a nut. Like, newspaper stories from his period of prominence in Chicago were full of stories of him, like, renting a horse that he thought might have been ridden by a murdered man to see if it would take him to the murderer. Or things like the time when a guy had been murdered, so he had a list of about 6 possible suspects, propped up the corpse in a mausoleum, and had the corpse pointing at them, and then led the suspects in one after the other. Now, this was widely reported at the time that he tried to scare them all into confessing. Exactly how true it is, I have some trouble believing, because just arranging the corpse like that would have been a deeply unpleasant task for whichever poor deputies he set up in charge of doing it. He was later the chief inspector during the Johann Hawk case that we covered a couple of weeks ago. And well, later on, in 1907, a young man knocked at his door by the name of Lazarus Averbach. Exactly what he was doing there, we don't really know. All that we know is Shippy saw the guy, thought that he looked like one of those Jewish radical anarchists that we've been hearing about, and shot him to death. They tried to write in on the paperwork later that he was carrying a knife, but it's disputed whether or not he actually was. Now, Shippy was never actually held responsible. It was determined that it was self-defense, but notably, he also never served another day in uniform after this. Shortly thereafter, they packed him off to an institution where he was suffering from what they called softening of the brain, which would have been very early onset dementia at the time. Could have also possibly been, syphilis or something, but they wouldn't have wanted to put that in the newspaper. And I shouldn't say it either, because I don't know. But while we're talking, we mentioned Johann Hawk a couple of times. Down over in a southern corner of the cemetery, a section that is mostly unmarked, lie the remains of a woman by the name of Marie Walker. Now, Marie Walker was running a candy store up in the Lincoln Park neighborhood in 1904 when she met a guy through a matrimonial agency. He came and talked to her for about half an hour, then said, "Okay, I like you, you like me, we can get married then, yeah?" So she had just agreed to marry Johann Hawk, the Bluebeard of Chicago. So shortly after the wedding, she started to get really sick, and by the end of the month, she was dead. And while her body was still lying on the slab, Hawk proposed to her sister. And her sister said yes. He didn't kill her sister, he just took her money and ran off to New York, which is a couple of mistakes. One is he hadn't been following the advances in the embalming arts and sciences. It used to be that if you gave somebody arsenic, as soon as the undertaker stepped into a room, there was no way you were getting convicted because there was arsenic in embalming fluid. In Marie's case, not only had they stopped using arsenic, but also he left his sister alive to alert the authorities. So just a few weeks after her death, she was exhumed. You can see Inspector Shippy right here in this photograph of them hauling the coffin up out of the ground so that they could be analyzed. Hawk himself was captured in New York and brought back, put on trial, suspected of at least half a dozen murders and probably even more than that, all along the lines of marrying a woman, taking her money, and killing her. But they did find plenty of arsenic in here, and I always like to point out with stuff like this, with his various wives that are buried around the city, the arsenic is still there. Presuming that the coffin is of sufficient quality that it hasn't completely worn away by now, arsenic is an element that doesn't biodegrade down to anything else. So it's quite possibly, I don't know, assuming that they eventually put the organs that they were testing back, which I imagine they probably did, it's probably still there. And once again, of course, you can now get your Johann Hawk t-shirts of him in this pose over at cafepress.com/mysteriouschicago. We'll move a bit down here. I just inserted those two, and it was normally we went right from the Holtons over to this. Now, off in the background here looms one of the more controversial parts of it, the Confederate Mound. We talked a couple of weeks ago about the insurrection plot when there were plans to break everybody out of Camp Douglas, our Confederate prisoner of war camp, to destroy Chicago on the eve of the election in 1864. Now, a lot of people died at that camp. They were initially buried at the Old City Cemetery, then eventually moved down to over here. But in front of them, and personally I love this thing, in front of them stands what neo-Confederates called this the ugly stone. They hate this thing. It is a cenotaph to those unknown heroic men once resident in the southern states, martyrs for human freedom, who at the breaking out of the Civil War refused to be traitors to the Union, who, without moral or material support, stood alone among ruthless enemies, and after unspeakable suffering either died at their post of duty, or abandoning home and possessions, sought refuge and scant bread for their families among strangers at the North. To those pure patriots who, without bounty, without pay, without pension, without honor, went to their graves, without recognition even by their country, this stone is raised and inscribed after 30 years waiting by one of themselves, an exiled abolitionists. Yet again, neo-Confederates absolutely hate this thing because it implies that the South was being the bad guys in the Civil War. I've read enough of their literature from back then. They were the War of Southern Stupidity. But right back behind it is the Confederate Mound. Well, in a lot of states, the biggest controversy with the Confederate statues is to have them moved to cemeteries. In this case, it's already in one. And other than the statue on the top, it doesn't try to lionize the Confederacy or anything. It's really just a large mass grave. And these weren't Confederate big shots or anything. These were kids who had been manipulated, lied to, drafted, and sent off to die. But I will just as a point out, the recent removal of the Richmond statues, Robert E. Lee doing his best Darth Maul impression right there. We all know what I think of that guy. But strangely enough, right in view of it, right in view of that Confederate mound, is the mausoleum of John Johnson. Actually has a view of the Confederate mound. John H. Johnson was the founder of Ebony and Jet magazines. First black man to appear on the Forbes 400. Born in Arkansas in 1926, came to Chicago after his parents came to the 1933 World's Fair and decided, there's more opportunities for us here than there are back down in the South. Went to high school with Nat King Cole, whose parents, I believe, did exactly the same thing, also with Red Fox. His finest moment, what he considered his finest moment, was in 1955, Emmett Till was murdered down in Mississippi, resident of Chicago. He was down visiting family. And At Emmett's mother's request, they published the photograph of Emmett. It's more gruesome than I want to put on a Sunday morning tour, but they published the photo of him in the casket to show what these people had done to him. He had allegedly whistled at a white woman, so they tortured, mutilated, and murdered him. This kind of helped open people's eyes in the mid-50s to just how bad things were down in the South. And I've just ran into that lately. It was one of the congresswomen that I was researching voted against an amendment saying that anybody accused of civil rights violations automatically got a jury trial in the South, because she said, we just saw what happened with Emmett Till. Those guys were all let go. We know what happens if you're going to get a jury trial for civil rights in the South. While we're on this one, just up across from here, one of our newest people in Chicago to have a street named after her, Ida B. Wells. Ida B. Wells, Crusader for Justice. Now, Ida initially came to Chicago to protest the World's Fair in 1893. Now, the World's Fair, they were really eager to get a representative from every state. When somebody pointed out we don't have a representative from the Alaska Territory yet, they immediately corrected that. They had representatives for various ethnic groups, but there wasn't a black representative. There wasn't really much of a black presence at the fair at all. At one point, they tried to make things better by having Negro Day with free watermelon, which now strikes us as incredibly tone deaf. So Ida came here initially to protest the fair. Frederick Douglass got a gig speaking there by representing the government of Haiti, which he figured was better than nothing. I think he and Ida clashed about it for a bit, but eventually she decided, okay, if he thinks that's better than nothing, then we'll do it. She is best known really for for anti-lynching activism. Lynching is still not a federal crime. There's a bill that's been going through Congress just recently for it, but Senator Rand Paul, all by himself, has been holding it up from getting to a vote. Now, one thing that she never wrote about or never mentioned was what has become the best-known black presence at the World's Fair just in the last couple of years, and so widely misreported and misrepresented that I hesitated even to put this on the tour, except that I knew if I didn't, I'd get emails about it. But there's recently been a marker added for Nancy Green, who it says here was the original Aunt Jemima, which is not exactly correct. Now, Aunt Jemima was not a real person. Lately, people have been saying this Nancy Green was the real Aunt Jemima. It was all based on her. She played her for years. They paid her so well. None of that's exactly true. Aunt Jemima was a character invented by the Purina Company. They even published a biography of her that talked about how much she loved serving pancakes to Jefferson Davis. The biography is not as bad as it could have been, I suppose. It could have been worse, but it's really pretty horrifying to read through if you can find it online. But in 1893, they hired her to play Aunt Jemima at the World's Fair. People could walk up and she would be singing songs or pass them out a sample of pancakes. She wasn't the first woman to play the part. Another woman had played Aunt Jemima at the Paris exposition a few years before, and she played the part for a couple of years. Then after her death in 1923, the Purina Company started making a really big deal about her, kind of bragging that they had made her famous throughout the world, that she had made a fortune working for them, neither of which was exactly true. Now, this did attract some notice at the World's Fair. There were a few reporters who went and casually mentioned that they had been to see Aunt Jemima, and she did win a blue ribbon, but frankly, pretty much everybody who set foot into those grounds got a blue ribbon. They were giving them out like they were going out of style. While we're on the subject of the fair, I've noticed this one. It was just such an interesting monument. So a guy named Werner Kummel, who was an engineer who came to Chicago for the World's Fair in 1893. He was an authority on gas and waterworks. Helped save Hamburg from a cholera wave that they'd had there in 1892. But he was all set to speak at the fair, but then he died in his hotel room. So other engineers who were there in town for the fair pitched in and got him this monument. I'm going over time today, so we're going to skip over. We're going to go through the baseball guys. There's a lot of baseball people over here at Oakwood Cemetery. Well, this one, I talked about there being some villains. First of all, Cap Anson.
We'll give them token jobs at the plant and have them play on our softball team. Honus Wagner, Cap Anson, Mordecai Three-Finger Brown.
Sir?
What is it, Smithers?
I'm afraid all those players have retired and passed on. In fact...
Yep, there he is. There he is, having passed on. And honestly, Cap Anson would not have played on the power plant softball team because they had Ken Griffey Jr. and Darryl Strawberry on that team as well. Cap Anson was, in all honesty, one of the greatest players of his game. He played first base mostly for the Cubs for 26 years between 1871 and the late 1890s. But he refused to even play exhibition matches against any team that had black players, helped establish the color line that stood up until Jackie Robinson. Later on started as like a bowling alley and a baseball team, but he blew all of his money. Ended up just doing vaudeville for a living with his daughters like throwing papier-mâché baseballs for him to hit. You can see his monument here was erected to his memory by the National League of Professional Baseball Clubs. Now, there were a lot of people out there back then that were like this. Ty Cobb was pretty famously awful, but generally people who knew both said that Cap Anson was an even bigger racist than Ty Cobb. And just down the road from him, there's a guy who comes up a lot. I didn't even realize just how much this guy comes up in Chicago history research. But Kennesaw Mountain Landis, named after the Battle of Kennesaw Mountain, which his father fought in the Civil War, spelled it with only one N for reasons nobody ever understood. The rest of the family was horrified that he was naming the kid Kennesaw Mountain, but his father would not be changed. And he became a judge here in Chicago. And really, he's connected with like practically everything that I look up. There's he denied a motion to extend the life of Johann Hawk after his conviction. He helped save Herman Billick after his conviction. Turns up in pretty much any major Chicago crime story in the 1910s or 1920s. Is probably going to wind through Kennesaw Mountain Landis at some point. Ben Heck said that nobody ever looked the part of a judge more than him. He was like some medieval guy looking down at you from the bench. But he was also kind of fiercely independent. You could never predict what the guy was going to do. And this is part of why they sought him out to become commissioner of baseball. Now, baseball suffered a real crisis after it turned out that the 1919 White Sox had been taking money from gamblers to lose the World Series on purpose. This was a huge scandal. The Professional Baseball Players Association decided we've got to show that we're serious and named Kennesaw Mountain Landis commissioner for life. He was not only the commissioner, but his judgments and rulings could not be questioned. So even though those baseball players were acquitted, he banned them all for life just to make sure there was not even an appearance that anything dishonest was going on in the game of baseball. Now today he's become kind of controversial because though the color line was already established when he got there, he didn't really do anything to stop it. He insisted that it wasn't really a thing. If some baseball team wanted to hire a black ball player, he couldn't stop them. But he also didn't seem to do much to encourage them to do so. And just down from it, we ought to have at least one good baseball story here, and luckily we do. Double Duty Radcliffe. Ted Radcliffe is known as Double Duty because he was both a pitcher and a catcher. Also, the newspaper man, Damon Runyon, said that he was worth the 2 prices of admissions to go to see. Now, he played for a number of teams, primarily in the Negro Leagues. He was also here in the Homestead Grays. I've got a note here saying which one he is. Actually played exhibition games against Ty Cobb, the teams that Cap Anson wouldn't play against. In this picture, he's on the far right, I think. Check my note. And behind him in the picture is Josh Gibson, who is widely regarded as possibly the best player of the time. He's third from right. Josh Gibson right behind him. Played with the Homestead Grays. Also roomed with Jackie Robinson when he played with the Kansas City Monarchs. Played for the American Giants in 1950. When they started hiring white players into the Negro Leagues, thinking that all the good black players were going to be thrown up. He threw a pitch out for the Schaumburg Flyers, the minor league team, in 1999 when he was 96, making him the oldest pro ball player. And after the age of 100, he threw one a year for the White Sox. lived to be 103 years old. A bit over time, so we're going to do one more today. There's one of the more notable monuments in it, about one of the people that we just don't know really that much about. This is Kate Richardson, the wife of Orlo Richardson, who was a carpet dealer. She was from Davenport, Iowa, died in 1890 at the age of 40, and that's about all that we really know about her. But there is this delightful thing from when they first got married. At the Quad Cities newspapers, they said, "Did just right. Like sensible people determined on future happiness, our young friend O.W. Richardson and the accomplished Miss Kate Tiffany sought the service of Reverend Mr. Lamb yesterday afternoon and were married. It is a noble example and worthy of emulation. We congratulate them. May their wedding tour be delightful, and the long and rugged pathway of life be strewn with flowers of unfading love, garlands of happiness, and satisfactory packages of greenbacks." That's nice. I gotta wonder if there was like somebody, the child of somebody on the editorial service was hesitant about getting married or something. There seems to be a little bit more marriage propaganda built into this one. Maybe I shouldn't say that right before Valentine's Day. But all right, everybody, I want to go ahead and plug the upcoming tours that we've got coming up here. Thursday night, bringing back one I've only done a couple of times called Mansions and Mysteries in River North. That's the neighborhood just above the Loop. Still has a lot of the old mansions from the time when it was a millionaire district, crammed in among all of the nightclubs. Then a week from today, a brand new one called Lost Stories from Chicago History. There's so many stories that I've researched for these morning mini tours the last couple of years, and even I learn them and then I kind of forget them. So we're going to bring some of these back. Some of these are just as interesting as the stories that became part of our popular imagination here in Chicago, but for whatever reason never became part of our part of the history that we remember, because nobody's retold them. Then a week from Thursday, we'll be doing a tour edition of 1920s Bohemia and the Wind Blew In. I did a lecture on that on Thursday night. There was a lot of interest in doing a proper tour version of it, where I can post all of the pictures and the video footage like normal. But all right, everybody, now should you need a Mysterious Chicago sweatshirt, hoodie, etc., just go to cafepress.com/MysteriousChicago. They've got everything that you need. And with that, everybody, I will put the Benny Goodman back on, and we will just hang out like we always do. So thanks a lot for joining me. I'm Adam Seltzer for Mysterious Chicago Tours. Happy Super Bowl Sunday. Here's Benny Goodman. Now, Rob, does anybody seek out the services of Parson Brown? He'll say, "Are you married?" We'll say, "Mind your business, Churchy." Or, "No, Churchy, we're just doing it. What are you going to do about it? What are you going to do?" No, Ava, this starts about the same time as ever. 9:50 Chicago time. Go to Clark Street for tomorrow? What's on Clark Street tomorrow? I may be spacing here. Rodney, I have no particular preference in the Super Bowl tonight. Jacqueline, I've organized some of my files on the Aurora Ripper stuff, but I really need to get into Aurora to look into more of it. But that's definitely one that's come up. They've spent the last couple of weeks like consolidating hard drives, organizing all of my files. There's so many articles I've just downloaded and not properly sorted the last couple of years. Oh, that Clark Street. Yeah, that probably makes sense. I gotta find a mural nearby there. Forgot tomorrow was Valentine's Day. I'm kind of, end of a tour, I'm kind of spacey. Thank you, Eleanor. Yes, all the tip links are over around here, helping me keep the lights on through winter when there's not much going on. Yeah, Susan, I tried to work in. We didn't have Shippy or Marie Walker Hawk weren't on this tour previously.
And here's another tune that they'll be playing as long as we dance. Stardust.
John, they have names of quite a number of the people who were buried under the Confederate Mound, but I'm not really convinced that they're necessarily there. Initially, the people who died there, and it was several thousand, were buried at the Old City Cemetery, but a lot of them ended up at the medical schools or just kind of got dumped. They were supposed to spend a year moving all the bodies down to Oak Woods, but they only actually worked on it for about a month. Lauren, we've done All Saints Cemetery quite a few times on Find a Grave Friday. I've never done a whole tour of it. I'm not that familiar with Otto Young. It's not the best way to do the betting, I guess. I'm looking him up right now. Merchant and real estate mogul. I need more than that. Like, was there a sex scandal? Do we have any good anecdotes about him? Where are the cats? Good question. Let's see. Well, here's Priya. Hey, Priya. And here's Mr. Miles. I know you all didn't get your Miles fix on Thursday.
Helen Ward sings once more. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo.
All right, they got the song on this one too. Miles is sleepy today. Gonna do TikTok kitty for him? TikTok? Let's do it. Tick-tock, 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 tick-tock. He's actually let me work at the desk today, so that's nice. Hear it everywhere you go, time of day. Now, Miles has been driving me nuts as I work on reorganizing my files because he does not like it when I sit at my desk. He hops up onto the keyboard about every 5 seconds.
Benny Goodman's orchestra, and the King Porter's Stomp.
Yeah, Miles was having a nap. Well, he wasn't asleep. He was just kind of crashing. Any good history or mysteries on Navy Pier? A little. They hosted a thing called the Pageant of Progress there in the 20s. There's some rumors about a ghost there. It's actually a great story. There's a place that used to be a ballroom. They say they see a person dancing around in it. And they brought in a psychic to investigate, and she said, "The ghost you are seeing is the ghost of a man who loved to dance in the ballroom." It's like, wow, did the spirits tell you that? Miles is up here on the desk with me now. Or on the shelves. Miles, don't knock the laptop down. It's like, who, me? Miles. Oh yeah, can somebody post the link there? For those of you who are new out there, there's a whole group called Mysterious Chicago Regulars and Miles Fan Club, where fans of these tours hang out and post pictures of their own cats. Well, you're turning 3 pretty soon. Tiffany, Woodlawn doesn't allow pictures, so I don't do too much there. We did a Find a Grave Friday. We did Shel Silverstein's grave there one time, but they came and chewed me out a bit for taking pictures.
This half hour of rhythm was presented by the Raja Rhythm. Benny Goodman and his orchestra playing for you from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago. This is the National Broadcasting Company.
I'll rewind the tape a little bit more. Or should I put on one of these other ones? I think this is the one we normally play right here. Play the one from the week after, maybe.
I feel like a feather in the breeze.
Yeah, Wendy, normally if you just take pictures, they're not really going to notice, let alone say anything. But I guess it took us a while to find Shel Silverstein. Georgie, yeah, Zell works with that same email address that's up there. How many cemeteries are there in Chicago? I couldn't give you a number. It's a lot. Oh yeah, well tomorrow would be the St. Valentine's Day Massacre anniversary. They do say that if there's fresh snow on the ground, you can see the outlines of the bodies in the snow. I've only known there to be fresh snow on the ground there once. And I didn't see anything until I snuck in and made some snow angels. Now, Sharon, there's so much more. There's only I can only fit so much on one tour. In fact, I've got the I do have the Lincoln statue and the soldiers. But unfortunately, this unless they would let me look at their records, which Dignity Memorial typically doesn't, it's going to be really hard to identify which one of these is which. As I know there are members of the United States Colored Troops, a couple of black Civil War soldiers buried here, but it's hard to locate. Yeah, Susan the Wall is in Vegas now. It was in a garage. The garage is long gone. Timmy, that's been me for a while, organizing stuff and not being able to find it. I'm usually very well organized with my stuff, but some days it just gets away from me. I think yesterday I added like 300 files into Evernote that have been sitting in my downloads folder, so I can get them properly tagged and archived. And finding out which ones I never actually downloaded anything on, I just read all the articles. Thanks for coming, Pat. I still got my whole carafe of tea.
Now Helen Ward has an antidote for the blues. I'm shooting high.
So many new songs of these, I think I've also played like the Christmas episode of the Benny Goodman, but that's still, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 new episodes. Keely, I just got the Chemex. I've been realizing I wasn't satisfied with my coffee at home. I'm still experimenting, because they say that performing the same experiment repeatedly and expecting different results is just normal if you make coffee at home, because that's what happens. Of course, now I've had it just sitting on my shelves, so it's a little bit cool. Thanks, Ava. Yeah, Kristen, in this day and age, and really I imagine even in 1936, there would have been members of the band kind of winking and nodding over that. still working on trying to arrange one particular mini tour that I'm hoping to get to do this week. Not totally sure we'll be able to pull it off, but it would be really cool. I shouldn't tease you like that.
National Broadcasting Company is presenting the music of Benny Goodman and his orchestra from the Joseph Urban Room of the Congress Hotel in downtown Chicago. And now a special, Big John special, by Benny Goodman and his orchestra.
Did Benny Goodman have band members from Chicago? Well, he was from Chicago. There's a jazz great named Bud Freeman buried over at Graceland Cemetery, and he and his friends wouldn't let Benny hang out with him. They thought his pants were uncool. Eventually, they changed their minds. Rob, it's one of those things why artists were called bohemians. There's a few different stories about it going around. Ah, Christine, that sounds good. Ooh. I gotta get something in the Instant Pot right now. Bridget, I usually stick with Throat Coat for these tours. I've been using Throat Coat on tours since my old Ghost Tour days. Many, many years ago now. Fajitas, that also sounds good. Yeah, Heather, I think it's caffeine free, but I already have plenty of coffee. But my other go-to tea is Lapsang Souchong, which tastes like a forest full of old people that somebody set fire to. And I'm not convinced it really helps my throat that much, but I am wild about the taste. Yeah, early on, doing back-to-back 3-hour ghost tours, by the end of the first one, I'd be talking like this. It was rough, I tell you. But alright, everybody, all this food talk is starting to make me a little bit hungry. So, upcoming tours, Thursday night, Mansions and Mysteries in River North. So many cool stories in River North, and so many cool buildings that are kind of hidden among all the very modern ones. A week from today, we'll be doing a brand new one, Lost Stories from Chicago History. Help me get reacquainted with all the stuff that I've studied and then forgotten over the course of these virtual tours. And a week from Thursday, the tour edition of 1920s Bohemia and the Wind Blew In. One of my favorite topics. Had a great time giving a talk about it the other night. So maybe we should really do a tour version while we're still within the month of the 100th anniversary of the Wind Blew In getting raided by the cops for hosting petting parties. So lots of great stuff coming up here as always. So everybody, thanks a lot for joining me today. Everybody try to stay warm, have a great time watching the Super Bowl, enjoy the Super Bowl food and commercials. But most importantly of all, everybody, stay spooky, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Adam from Mysterious Chicago.